Welcome to the EarnEase Podcast, where we help you work smarter, build multiple income streams, and create lasting financial freedom. Whether you're an entrepreneur, creator, professional, or someone looking to earn more without burning out, you're in the right place. Every episode brings practical strategies, money insights, AI tools, business ideas, and real-world systems designed to help you grow your income and build a life on your terms. I'm your host, and together we'll explore smarter ways to earn, save, invest, and create wealth in today's rapidly changing world. So grab a notebook, stay curious, and let's make earning easier. This is the EarnEase Podcast.
So, imagine there's this mathematical threshold, right? And it's so incredibly razor thin that if you save just like one less dollar today, it statistically guarantees you will never be able to retire.
Right. It basically forces you to just keep working until the day you die.
Which is wild. So, welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Our mission for you, the listener, is to completely deconstruct the true mechanics of financial freedom.
Yeah, because I think we operate under this collective delusion that retirement is just this purely chronological event, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Like, we treat it like a finish line that just magically appears the second you turn 65.
Exactly. Completely independent of the actual, underlying physics of our financial lives.
Yeah, which is why today we're skipping the standard, patronizing advice about, skipping your morning coffee.
Right, that stuff is just...
It's exhausting. So instead, we've got a stack of sources that will completely force you to view your entire life trajectory through a fundamentally different lens.
We are looking at some fascinating stuff today.
We really are. We're starting with the personal documentation of a single mother who achieved financial independence on literally a poverty-level income. This is from the YouTube channel Raising Wildflowers.
And we're going to cross-reference her lived experience with the official Equifax guidelines on the FIRE movement.
Right, along with this really stark realization from a financial planner named Mark Schweiss about the insidious nature of lifestyle creep.
But the real core of our analysis, the heavy lifting, is going to center on this highly complex academic paper by Bushra Shinam Ashraf and Thomas S. Salisbury.
Yeah, the math in that one is intense.
It is. They built a mathematical life cycle consumption model to basically locate what they call the bifurcation in optimal retirement.
Which maps the exact tipping point between freedom and a lifetime of mandatory labor.
Exactly. And finally, for those who actually managed to build that wealth, we're breaking down a comprehensive wealth management ebook from Laird Norton Weatherby.
Yeah, detailing all the really aggressive tax preservation strategies used to protect it.
Because building it is only half the battle.
Right. But we have to start with the human behavior that actually feeds those complex mathematical models,
Definitely. Because before we can talk about asset location or Cobb-Douglas utility functions, we really need to examine the raw psychology of resource allocation.
Yeah, which brings us perfectly to the Raising Wildflowers story.
It's quite a story.
It really is. So here is a creator who somehow managed to buy a house and raise a family while her income hovered between $20,000 and $40,000 a year.
Right. And just for context, as a single mother making $22,000, she was operating far below the median household income.
And receiving zero child support.
Right. None. And despite that, she chose to buy a severe fixer-upper house.
Which, that introduces massive immediate risk.
Oh, massive. And the specific incident she documents is so pivotal. Shortly after moving in, on her incredibly tight budget, the home's septic system completely fails.
Ugh, the worst nightmare.
It really is. It backs up and literally floods half of her basement with raw sewage.
And the detail that makes this so just visceral is that the basement is exactly where she was hiding her kids' Christmas presents.
Oh, man.
Yeah. She describes just standing in this dark, freezing basement, staring at these gifts she had scraped together pennies to afford, and they're just floating in waste.
The psychological weight of that moment is staggering.
It really is. Because the immediate consumer reflex for most of us in that situation is to just throw money at the problem, right?
Oh, absolutely. You want to call the emergency 24-hour plumber, pay whatever exorbitant premium they ask for, and just have someone else make the nightmare go away.
But you couldn't?
No. She literally lacked the capital to deploy that consumer reflex. She was forced to navigate the crisis manually.
Like actually getting in there?
Yeah, she cleaned the hazard herself, diagnosed the septic issue, and executed the repair.
Wow.
And the takeaway she extracts from this isn't just like a survival story. It's really a foundational thesis on wealth accumulation.
Which is what exactly?
She recognized that financial capability is born almost exclusively from sitting in discomfort.
Okay, wait, let me test that thesis, though.
Right.
Because isn't the entire point of accumulating wealth so that we don't have to clean up our own flooded septic tanks?
That's the common perception, yeah.
Right. Like, I want financial freedom specifically to buy a buffer between myself and raw discomfort.
Sure.
If the strategy for wealth requires a lifetime of DIY sewage management, I think most people would rather just stay in the corporate grind, you know? How does embracing that level of friction translate to an actual scalable strategy for the listener?
Well, it doesn't mean you fix septic tanks forever.
Okay, good.
It means you temporarily leverage your own discomfort to break your dependency on expensive external solutions during the accumulation phase of your life.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, every time you substitute your own labor for external labor, you preserve capital. And preserving that capital is what eventually buys the ultimate buffer, which is freedom.
That makes a lot of sense. And for this creator, preserving that capital culminated in a strategy of extreme geo-arbitrage.
Exactly. She basically decoupled her life from the American consumer engine.
Yeah. Once she learned she could survive by needing less and doing more herself, she took the logical next step. She moved her family to Thailand.
And it is so crucial to understand here that her income didn't magically triple when she crossed the border.
Right. She was still operating on that same modest remote revenue stream from her digital content.
But her purchasing power experienced a violent upward trajectory.
The numbers she provides are just jarring if you're used to a Western cost of living. Like, she takes her entire family out for dinner, a proper sit-down meal for roughly $12 total.
That's incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
They vacation in beachfront bungalows for under $25 a night.
Wow.
And because their primary mode of transportation is a scooter, her monthly fuel expenditure is less than $10.
$10 a month.
Oh, yeah. Her cellular data plan is $9 a month.
So we are essentially looking at the practical application of purchasing power parity.
Exactly.
She didn't try to out-earn the inflation and high cost of living in the United States, which is, you know, a game most people lose.
Right.
She completely altered the denominator of her financial equation. By deflating the cost of her environment, she bought back her time.
Yeah, she doesn't work out of a desperate need to cover a $3,000 mortgage anymore. She works on her writing and video production out of curiosity and engagement.
But this introduces a massive scaling problem, right?
For the listener, you mean?
Yeah, we can't all just pack up our lives, abandon our local support networks, and move to a beach in Southeast Asia to exploit a weaker currency.
No, definitely not.
So how do we take the psychological resilience of that single mother and apply it as a measurable framework for a listener who works in a standard corporate environment and wants to stay in their home country?
Well, that scales directly into the architecture of the FIRE movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
As documented in that Equifax guide.
Yes, exactly.
FIRE, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, is essentially the systematized mathematical realization of what that creator was doing intuitively.
Right. It strips away the necessity of moving to Thailand and replaces it with aggressive, localized financial engineering.
And according to Equifax, that engineering basically rests on two massive pillars: the FIRE number and the 4% rule. Let's really deconstruct these because they're constantly misunderstood.
They really are.
So your FIRE number is essentially your escape velocity. The standard calculation dictates that you need 25 times your annual expenses invested in the market to achieve independence.
And that multiplier of 25 exists entirely to serve the 4% rule.
Right.
The premise is that if you have a broadly diversified portfolio of equities and bonds, you can withdraw 4% of its total value in your first year of retirement.
And then adjust for inflation after that.
Exactly. In every subsequent year, you adjust that withdrawal amount strictly for inflation. Historically, back-tested against market data, a portfolio structured this way has an incredibly high probability of surviving a 30-year period without being completely depleted.
So just mapping the math for the listener, if you determine your household can operate comfortably on, say, $60,000 a year, you multiply that by 25.
Which means your target FIRE number is $1.5 million.
Right. You accumulate $1.5 million, you pull out 4%, which is your $60,000, and the underlying market growth replenishes the capital you extracted.
In theory, yes.
In theory.
But reaching $1.5 million in a condensed time frame, say by age 40 or 45, requires a savings rate that most traditional financial advisors would consider draconian.
Because the standard advice is what? Save 10 to 15% of your gross income?
Right. But FIRE practitioners routinely target savings rates of 50%, 60%, or even 75%.
Which is wild.
It requires an aggressive, intentional dismantling of current consumption.
Which perfectly explains why Equifax outlines several distinct variations of FIRE. Because maintaining a 75% savings rate while living in a major metropolitan area requires a level of asceticism that borders on punitive.
It's too much for most people. The variations kind of emerged as a psychological pressure release valve.
All right.
The closest to our YouTube creator is lean FIRE. This involves permanent, extreme budgeting.
Like living on rice and beans forever.
Kind of, yeah. These individuals plan to keep their expenses incredibly low indefinitely, which means their required FIRE number might only be $600,000 or $800,000.
They buy their freedom very early, but the trade-off is a permanent restriction on luxury.
Exactly. Then you have fat FIRE, which seems almost contradictory to the original movement.
Yeah, that one always confused me a bit.
Well, this is the individual who wants to exit the workforce at 45, but they still intend to fly business class, maintain a large home, and eat at premium restaurants.
So they absolutely refuse to compress their lifestyle.
Right. Consequently, their target FIRE number isn't 1.5 million, it's 5 million or $10 million.
Wow.
Fat FIRE almost exclusively requires a massive income during the accumulation phase. It's high stress, high reward.
But the most interesting structural compromise, I think, is barista FIRE.
Oh, yeah.
This one feels like the most accessible release valve for the average listener.
It really is. In barista FIRE, you aggressively build a nest egg, but you stop before you reach that full 25x multiplier.
So you're not fully financially independent.
No, but instead of enduring another decade of corporate burnout to hit the absolute finish line, you pivot.
Yeah.
You quit the high-pressure career and take a low-stress part-time job.
Hence the term barista.
Exactly. The income from this job covers your immediate living expenses and ideally provides corporate health insurance.
Which allows your existing investments to sit entirely untouched, right? Just compounding in the background for another 15 years until traditional retirement age.
That's the beauty of it. You are trading absolute idle freedom for a radically improved daily quality of life today.
But, you know, the Equifax documentation doesn't just paint a utopian picture. The risks inherent to this movement are pretty severe, particularly sequence of returns risk.
Yeah, that is definitely the Achilles heel of the 4% rule. The math works beautifully on average.
Right.
But human beings don't live in averages. We live in sequential time. If you retire at 40 and the stock market immediately suffers a prolonged 40% correction in your first 3 years.
Which happens.
It happens. And if you are simultaneously withdrawing 4% to live on, you are cannibalizing the core engine of your wealth.
Yet your portfolio may never mathematically recover, even when the market eventually bounces back.
And if you are American, there's the catastrophic variable of healthcare.
Oh, absolutely. Exiting the workforce at 40 leaves you staring down a 25-year chasm before Medicare eligibility.
And purchasing comprehensive health insurance on the open market without an employer subsidy can easily cost a family $20,000 to $30,000 a year in premiums and deductibles.
That alone shatters a lean FIRE budget.
It requires extreme vigilance. But the external threats, like market crashes and healthcare premiums, those are often secondary to the internal threat.
Right.
The most dangerous variable to any wealth accumulation strategy is the silent escalation of your own baseline desires.
Which brings us to the financial planner Mark Schweiss and his dissection of lifestyle creep versus inflation.
This is such a fascinating case study.
It is, because defining your FIRE number as $1.5 million assumes that your $60,000 annual budget will remain static, aside from basic inflation.
Right.
And Schweiss's personal realization really demonstrates just how fragile that assumption is.
The context of his epiphany is just brilliant. He is clearing out boxes to move into a condo, and he unearths a wooden box from high school.
Yeah.
Inside is a dot matrix printout, like a physical artifact of his past financial life, detailing his cash flow from 1993 to 1998.
And the numbers are just fascinating to look at in retrospect. Over that 5-year period in the 90s, his average annual income was $35,452.
Right.
And his total living expenses were $31,199.
His immediate reaction, viewing this decades later as an established professional, is just pure disbelief. He cannot fathom how he survived on $31,000 a year.
Right.
But as a financial planner, he knows he has to adjust for macroeconomic reality. So he applies a historical 3% annual inflation rate to those figures.
To see what it would be today.
Exactly. In modern purchasing power, that $35,000 income translates to roughly $66,000 today.
Okay.
And the $31,000 in expenses translates to about $58,000.
So to maintain the exact same standard of living he had in 1998, he would only need to spend $58,000 today.
That's the math.
But Schweiss openly admits that $58,000 wouldn't even come close to covering his current life. Like, he notes that his current annual mortgage payments alone eclipse his entire cost of living, housing, food, entertainment, everything from his 20s.
The math proves that inflation is entirely innocent of this massive discrepancy.
Right.
The $58,000 accounts for the rising cost of bread, the increased price of fuel, the general devaluation of the currency. The gap between that $58,000 and his actual current spending is composed entirely of lifestyle creep.
So if lifestyle creep is ego, is this essentially like a tax we pay to our own vanity?
That's a great way to put it.
Because if so, the math of the FIRE movement requires a level of psychological asceticism that most Americans simply don't possess.
Yeah.
We operate on a hedonic treadmill. You know,
We really do.
we get a promotion, and suddenly the Honda Civic we were perfectly happy driving feels inadequate, so we upgrade to the BMW. We start flying direct instead of taking layovers. We stop looking at the prices on the right side of the menu.
Yeah, a tax we pay to our vanity is an incredibly accurate way to frame it. Lifestyle creep is the insidious process where former luxuries basically metabolize into baseline necessities.
Exactly.
And Schweiss makes a critical observation here. Human beings are fiercely resistant to downgrading their lifestyle.
Oh, fierce.
Once you adapt to the square footage of a larger house or the convenience of premium services, reverting back feels like an unacceptable failure. We only roll back lifestyle creep when forced by catastrophic external events like a recession, a medical emergency, a divorce.
It's a one-way ratchet.
It is.
And for the listener calculating their future, Schweiss's warning is clear. Focus entirely on the variables within your control. You cannot legislate the inflation rate.
No, you can't.
If you're 40 years old, spending $100,000 a year, and you plan to retire at 65, basic 3% inflation dictates you will need $209,000 a year in future dollars just to buy the exact same goods.
That is structural.
Right. But deciding whether to inflate your desires beyond that baseline is entirely a behavioral choice.
Exactly. If you allow your spending to continuously scale with your income, your required FIRE number ceases to be a static target. It becomes a mirage that continuously recedes toward the horizon the faster you run toward it.
But, you know, this entire framework, the 4% rule, the 25x multiplier, projecting our expenses into the future, it all still assumes a relatively linear, predictable human life.
Right.
What happens if we strip away the rules of thumb and run these behavioral choices through an advanced, rigorously academic lifespan simulation?
That is when the simplistic narrative of retirement completely shatters.
Which pulls us into the deep waters of the Ashraf and Salisbury paper, Bifurcation and Optimal Retirement.
Yes.
This is not a blog post. This is a dense mathematical exploration of life cycle consumption models. When I was reading this, it genuinely felt like staring at the source code of human financial existence.
It is a remarkable piece of economic literature. Their objective was to basically understand the precise utility preferences that drive human retirement behavior.
Okay.
To do this, they constructed a sophisticated deterministic model.
Let's build this model piece by piece so the listener can visualize exactly what we are testing here. Who is the subject of this simulation?
Okay, so they conceptualize an individual starting at exactly 30 years of age. This baseline human earns exactly 1 unit of labor income annually. You can basically visualize this as a static salary.
Got it.
The model assumes they invest any unconsumed wealth purely into a risk-free asset that generates a constant 2.5% return.
Okay, 2.5%.
Yeah. They also deliberately remove any bequest motive. This individual does not care about leaving an inheritance. Their sole mathematical objective is to maximize their own lifetime happiness through consumption and leisure.
And the way the paper handles lifespan is fascinating. They don't just say, assume the person dies at 85. They introduce the Gompertz law of mortality.
Yes, and this is crucial for accuracy. The Gompertz-Makeham law of mortality is a demographic model that accurately describes how the human death rate increases exponentially with age.
Okay.
So instead of a hard stop, the model calculates the statistical probability of surviving year over year.
Right. They set the absolute maximum possible lifespan at 110 years. But applying the Gompertz law, they establish a modal, or peak life expectancy, of 88.82 years, accompanied by a dispersion parameter of 9.44 years.
Exactly.
Why is using this probabilistic curve so much more effective than just picking a static death date?
Because it mathematically replicates human anxiety.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. If you knew with absolute certainty you would die on your 85th birthday, optimizing your wealth would be simple arithmetic. You would just divide your bank account by the remaining days.
Right, but we don't know.
Exactly. We don't know. We have to plan for the long tail of mortality. The dispersion parameter of 9.44 years means there is a massive statistical variance in how long you might need your money to last.
Yeah.
This forces the model's subject to act defensively, mimicking our real-world fear of outliving our assets.
Okay, so we have a 30-year-old facing a probabilistic lifespan stretching potentially to 110, earning a static income, getting 2.5% on their savings. What is the engine that drives their decision-making? Like, how does a math equation know what happiness is?
The engine is something called a Cobb-Douglas utility function.
Okay.
In economics, utility is the abstract measure of satisfaction. Ashraf and Salisbury utilize this specific function because it allows them to explicitly weight the value of consumption differently depending on whether the individual is working or retired.
We need to translate that into a physical feeling. How does a Cobb-Douglas utility function map onto human experience?
Think about the physical expenditure of energy. If you are forced to march 10 miles with a heavy pack in the pouring rain because your commanding officer ordered you to, you are burning calories, but the utility of your enjoyment is deeply negative.
Right, it's a grueling chore.
But if you choose to hike that exact same 10 miles with the same pack in the same rain, but you are doing it voluntarily to reach a beautiful vista on a weekend trip, you derive immense satisfaction from the exact same physical exertion.
Because the context of autonomy fundamentally changes the value of the experience.
Exactly. The Cobb-Douglas function mathematically proves that a human being derives significantly more utility from spending $1 when they have the autonomy and leisure of retirement compared to spending that identical dollar while exhausted and confined by a labor schedule.
Wow.
It is basically the quantification of the value of your free time.
But this requires the researchers to assign a specific numerical value to that free time, right? They denote this as the leisure parameter, represented by the letter L. And finding the correct value for L seems like the most precarious part of the entire study.
It is the fulcrum of the entire paper. If they set the leisure parameter too low, the model's math dictates that free time is worthless, and the simulated human will simply choose to work until age 110 to maximize their wealth. If they set well too high, the model suggests free time is so infinitely valuable that the simulated human will gladly starve to death in a ditch just to retire at age 31.
So how do you find the exact mathematical constant for human laziness?
Yeah.
Or, to be polite, our preference for leisure?
They had to anchor it to real-world behavioral data. They utilized standard fidelity investment guidelines.
Which suggest what?
They suggest that to maintain your lifestyle and retire comfortably by age 67, an individual should have accumulated 10 times their annual income. To retire by age 55, they should have 7 times their annual income.
And then they just ran simulations until the math matched the fidelity reality.
Not just simulations. They executed massive computational grid searches. They systematically adjusted the old parameter, running thousands of lifespan iterations, searching for the exact number that produced behavioral outputs mirroring those fidelity targets.
That's intense.
They note in the paper that this specific process required 48 hours of uninterrupted computing time. When the math finally aligned with human reality, they isolated the leisure parameter, L equals 6.49.
Okay, so the architecture is complete. We have the mortality curve, the 2.5% return, the labor constraints, the utility function, and this perfectly calibrated leisure parameter of 6.49. They press start on the simulation. What happens to our 30-year-old?
The mathematics reveal a massive systemic phenomenon that they title the bifurcation.
The word itself implies a violent splitting. What is fracturing inside this simulation?
The optimal life trajectory of the individual fractures dictated entirely by their starting wealth. When you plot this on a graph with the individual's age on the horizontal axis and their wealth level on the vertical axis, the time-wealth state space does not progress linearly.
It splinters.
Yes, it splinters into 3 highly distinct, mathematically rigid regions.
Walk us through these regions. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with the ideal scenario. Region 1, high initial wealth. On their state space graph, this region exists above a specific mathematically plotted blue boundary line.
Okay.
If an individual's wealth to age ratio places them anywhere in this upper region, the utility function screams that they must stop working immediately.
The paper provides a stunning specific example for this, right? If our 30-year-old subject begins the simulation with exactly 9.89 times their annual income already saved in that 2.5% risk-free asset, the math determines they have hit escape velocity.
Yes.
The optimal behavior to maximize their lifetime happiness is to trigger retirement on day one.
Because of the compounding growth of that initial capital combined with a mathematically optimized withdrawal rate guarantees they will survive the Gompertz mortality curve without running out of money while maximizing the high leisure utility of those dollars.
Incredible. Now let's plunge to the absolute bottom of the graph, region 2, low initial wealth.
If the individual's starting wealth falls below a specific threshold, which the researchers map as a magenta curve, the math triggers a bleak optimal strategy.
Which is?
If you are in this lower region, the model dictates that you should plan to never retire.
That implies a terrifying level of futility. Not work harder or save more, just never retire.
Mathematically, yes. The simulation calculates that you lack the capital mass necessary to ever reach that blue escape boundary before the mortality curve catches you.
Right.
Therefore, attempting to aggressively save and compress your current consumption will only cause you misery today without ever actually buying your freedom tomorrow.
So what are you supposed to do?
To maximize your total lifetime utility under these constraints, the optimal behavior is to simply consume your income as it arrives, maintain minimal emergency reserves, and accept that you will remain in the labor force until your biological expiration.
Wow. It is incredibly dark validation of the anxiety so many people feel about being left behind financially.
It really is.
But the true genius of this paper isn't the extremes, right? It's what happens in the space between the blue immediate retirement boundary and the magenta never retire curve, region 3.
Yes, the middle space. The researchers identify a highly specific critical wealth level within this gap, which they denote as duteldet.
Okay, DILD.
And at this exact threshold, they found something astonishing. There exists a continuum of entirely different life paths that all yield the exact same identical amount of lifetime utility. They call this the uncommitted curve.
To visualize this, imagine you are hiking to the summit of a mountain, and you reach a watershed divide on a razor-thin knife-edge ridge. If you stumble and take a single step just an inch to your left, gravity takes over.
Yeah.
All the water flows down to the Pacific Ocean.
Huh?
That step represents dropping mathematically below that magenta curve. You have lost the altitude required to ever escape the labor force. If you step an inch to your right, the water flows toward the Atlantic. You have bumped up into the territory where aggressive savings will definitively push you over the blue boundary into guaranteed retirement. But what does it mean if you are perfectly balanced in the middle, just walking the ridge?
If you are hovering on the uncommitted curve, you exist in a state of absolute mathematical suspension. You are saving a moderate amount, you are consuming a moderate amount, but you haven't accumulated the specific critical mass of capital required to lock in the retirement trajectory.
Okay.
And because you are on a razor's edge, you are incredibly vulnerable to the butterfly effect.
Meaning tiny behavioral changes yield catastrophic long-term divergence.
Precisely. If you are on that ridge at age 35 and you succumb to the lifestyle creep we discussed earlier, you buy the expensive car, you upgrade the house, that marginal increase in consumption doesn't just delay your retirement from age 65 to 67.
What does it do?
It can physically push you off the right side of the ridge and dump you down the left side into the magenta zone. A temporary indulgence in your 30s can mathematically alter your optimal life strategy from, I will retire eventually, to, I must work forever.
That is terrifying. And the paper proves that this ridge is highly sensitive to macroeconomic forces outside of our control, right? Specifically interest rates.
Yes, they reran the model adjusting the risk-free return rate. They discovered that if interest rates rise, for example, moving from 2.5% to 5%, the entire blue optimal retirement boundary shifts drastically downward on the graph.
Because your capital is working twice as hard. You need a significantly smaller physical pile of cash to achieve the same passive income stream.
Yes. Higher interest rates make the mathematical threshold for retirement much easier to clear.
But the reverse is also true.
Right. Conversely, in a prolonged low interest rate environment, that boundary skyrockets out of reach, forcing millions of people who thought they were safe to suddenly realize they are standing on the uncommitted curve or worse, have fallen below it.
So let's construct a scenario where our listener actually navigates this gauntlet. They master their psychology. They suppress lifestyle creep. They aggressively build their capital, successfully walking that ridge until they secure enough mass to cross the blue boundary.
Okay.
They have achieved their fire number. They have beaten the bifurcation math.
Then the rules of the game fundamentally shift.
Exactly. Because once you build a machine that powerful, your primary objective ceases to be growth. Your objective becomes defense. You have to protect the wealth from structural friction.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the Laird Norton Weatherby Wealth Management ebook, Tax Strategies for Making the Most of Your Wealth.
Transitioning from the accumulation phase to the preservation and access phase introduces the most aggressive creditor your wealth will ever face the tax code.
The overarching philosophy of this ebook is a concept they call the tax-aware mindset. And I want to be very clear here. This isn't a veiled discussion about illegal tax evasion or sketchy offshore accounts.
It's not at all. Tax-aware investing is about recognizing a fundamental mathematical truth. It is utterly irrelevant what your portfolio earns on paper. The only metric that matters is the net capital you legally retain.
Right.
The strategy is to view reduced tax liability not as an administrative chore, but as a literal compounding form of investment return.
The ebook provides a chart that makes this conceptual idea violently real. They model a hypothetical $1 million portfolio over a 40-year time horizon. They assume a baseline static market return of 5% annually.
Okay.
If you simply let that sit, paying standard taxes, it grows. But if you apply structural tax-efficient strategies that manage to add just 0.5% to your net return each year, over 40 years, that portfolio grows to approximately $8 million.
That's a huge difference.
It is. And if you optimize aggressively and squeeze out an extra 1.5% annually through tax efficiency, that exact same starting capital balloons to over $11.5 million.
You are generating millions of dollars in excess wealth without taking on a single ounce of additional market risk. That is the power of shielding compounding interest from annual taxation.
So how do we do it?
Well, Laird Norton outlines 3 tactical phases to achieve this. The first phase is optimization during the building years, primarily through asset location.
Which is distinctly different from asset allocation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Allocation is deciding you want 70% stocks and 30% bonds. Location is deciding exactly which accounts those assets are allowed to live in.
Exactly, because the IRS treats different accounts as entirely different jurisdictions. You have standard taxable brokerage accounts where every dividend and capital gain is taxed in the year it occurs.
Right.
You have tax-deferred accounts like traditional 401ks and IRAs where the money goes in tax-free but is taxed upon withdrawal. And you have tax-exempt accounts like Roth IRAs where the money goes in after taxes but grows and is withdrawn completely tax-free forever.
So how do we optimize the geography of our assets?
You quarantine your highly inefficient income-producing assets like corporate bonds, REITs, or actively managed mutual funds that constantly trigger short-term capital gains exclusively inside your tax-advantaged retirement accounts.
Okay, so those accounts act as a blast shield against annual taxes.
Precisely. Conversely, you place highly tax-efficient assets like broad market index funds that generate minimal dividends, or municipal bonds, which are federally tax-exempt, into your standard taxable brokerage accounts.
And the ebook cites Vanguard research stating that getting this location puzzle correct can add up to 0.70% in additional return every single year, which, as we just saw, translates to millions over a lifetime.
It really does.
They also detail tax loss harvesting, which sounds incredibly intimidating, but is actually mechanically straightforward.
It is the practice of monetizing market volatility. Let's say you buy a tech ETF for $10,000 and the market crashes, dropping its value to $7,000. Yeah. Right. In a standard account, that $3,000 loss is just a paper tragedy. But with tax loss harvesting, you intentionally sell the ETF to officially realize the loss.
And then what?
The IRS allows you to use that $3,000 loss to directly offset $3,000 of capital gains you might have made on a different investment, basically neutralizing the tax bill.
But you don't just leave the money in cash, right?
Yeah.
You have to stay invested for the rebound.
Exactly. You immediately take the $7,000 in cash and buy a highly correlated but legally distinct asset like a slightly different tech ETF. You maintain your exact exposure to the market sector, but you have successfully extracted a valuable tax asset from the crash.
Okay, so you've located your assets perfectly, you've harvested your losses, and your wealth has grown exponentially. Phase 2 of the ebook tackles the hardest part of the FIRE journey, accessing that wealth without triggering a massive taxable event.
Right. The standard default advice for retirees is to drain their taxable accounts first and leave their tax-deferred accounts, like traditional IRAs, untouched for as long as legally possible, allowing them to grow tax-deferred until the government forces you to take required minimum distributions.
But Laird Norton suggests an aggressive inversion of that strategy, particularly for people engaging in early retirement or barista fire. They advocate for strategic Roth conversions during low-income windows.
This is a brilliant maneuver. Let's assume you retire at 50 or you transition to a low-paying passion project. Suddenly, your W-2 earned income drops to near zero. You find yourself in one of the lowest possible marginal tax brackets.
Okay.
Instead of letting your traditional IRA sit there, you proactively withdraw money from it.
Because your income is so low, you pay an incredibly marginal tax rate on that withdrawal.
Exactly. You pay the negligible tax, and then you immediately deposit those funds into a Roth IRA. You are intentionally accelerating your tax payment while the rates are highly favorable to you.
That's smart.
Once that money crosses the threshold into the Roth IRA, it is permanently shielded. It will grow tax-free for the rest of your life, and the eventual withdrawals will be tax-free. You are systematically moving wealth from a vulnerable jurisdiction to an impenetrable one.
But what if your wealth isn't sitting in a liquid Vanguard account? What if your net worth is tied up in a highly appreciated, illiquid asset? A commercial building, a family farm, a private business. If you sell that outright, the capital gains tax could instantly vaporize a quarter of your net worth.
They offer structural solutions for illiquidity as well. The first is the installment sale. Instead of selling the commercial property to a buyer for a single, massive $5 million lump sum, which immediately catapults you into the highest possible tax bracket and triggers the net investment income tax, you act as the bank.
So you structure the contract so the buyer pays you over a period of 5 or 10 years.
Precisely. By stretching the realization of those capital gains over a decade, you recognize a smaller portion of the profit each year. This keeps your adjusted gross income lower, potentially allowing you to stay in the 15% long-term capital gains bracket rather than the 20% bracket, saving you hundreds of thousands of dollars.
They also highlight the principal residence conversion, which is arguably the most powerful tax break available to the average listener who owns real estate.
Yes, Section 121.
Let's say you own a rental property that you bought for $200,000, and over 20 years, it has appreciated to $700,000. If you just sell it as an investment property, you owe taxes on that $500,000 gain.
But the tax code allows you to physically alter the nature of the asset through your behavior. If you stop renting it out, move into the property, and live there as your primary legal residence for just 2 out of the 5 years preceding the sale, the asset is reclassified.
And under Section 121 of the tax code, a married couple can exclude up to $500,000 of profit on the sale of a primary residence, completely free of capital gains taxes. A single individual can exclude $250,000. You literally live in the house to wash the tax liability off the asset.
It is the ultimate alignment of lifestyle design and tax strategy.
But we have to elevate one more time, because the final phase of the Laird Norton ebook enters a realm that many people assume is entirely inaccessible to them, transferring wealth, specifically through the use of complex trusts.
Right.
And I want to voice the skepticism I know our listener is feeling right now. When the average person hears the word trust, they picture the Vanderbilt family, sprawling East Coast estates, and trust fund kids fighting over corporate empires in a television drama. Why is a listener who is merely trying to optimize their $2 million FIRE number looking at dynasty trusts?
Because that perception of trusts as mere status symbols for billionaires is entirely manufactured. A trust, stripped of the cultural baggage, is nothing more than a highly sophisticated legal vessel designed to exert control over capital across time while shielding it from the IRS.
Okay.
It allows you to dictate exactly how, when, and under what conditions your wealth is deployed long after you are gone.
Okay, let's pull back the curtain on these vessels. The ebook lists a litany of acronyms: GST, CLT, CRT, GRAT. Let's dissect how these actually function mechanically. Start with the GST.
The generation skipping trust. This is exactly what people mean when they say dynasty trust. The core threat to generational wealth is the estate tax. Historically, wealth is taxed when you die and pass it to your children. When your children die and pass it to their children, it is taxed again.
Right.
A massive fortune can be ground to dust in 3 generations just through estate taxation.
So the GST bypasses the middle generation.
It legally isolates the assets. You place the wealth into the GST, utilizing your lifetime exemption. The trust itself now owns the assets. It can distribute income to your children and eventually to your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, but because the individuals don't legally own the principal, the assets are never subjected to estate taxes when those generations pass away.
That's wild.
In states with favorable trust laws, like Washington, a GST can legally operate and compound tax-free for up to 150 years.
It is a literal financial time capsule.
Yeah.
Then we have the philanthropic mechanisms, which solve a very specific psychological dilemma, wanting to support a charity, but also needing to ensure your family's financial security.
Right.
They detail the CLT and the CRT.
These are inverse mirror images of each other. The CLT is the charitable lead trust. Lead means the charity stands at the front of the line. You fund the trust, and it is mandated to pay a fixed annuity to a designated charity for a set number of years. By committing those funds, you receive an immediate, massive charitable tax deduction today, which can offset a high-income year. Once the set term expires, whatever principal remains in the trust reverts to your family.
And the CRT, the charitable remainder trust, flips the timeline.
Exactly. The charity gets the remainder at the end. This is specifically powerful for highly appreciated, illiquid assets. Suppose you own $2 million of stock with a near-zero cost basis. If you sell it, the capital gains tax is brutal. Instead, you transfer the stock into the CRT.
Because the CRT is technically a charitable entity, it can sell that $2 million in stock and pay zero capital gains tax.
Correct. The trust now holds $2 million in liquid untaxed cash, which it reinvests. The trust is then legally required to pay you, the grantor, an income stream and annuity for the rest of your natural life.
Wow.
You turned an illiquid, highly taxable asset into a guaranteed lifetime paycheck. And only when you die does the remainder of the trust pass to the charity.
But the mechanism that truly requires a slow, deep explanation is the grantor retained annuity trust. The ebook highlights this specifically for business owners, and understanding the math behind a GRAT reveals exactly how the ultra-wealthy move massive fortunes completely invisibly.
The GRAT is an architectural masterpiece of tax code exploitation. Let's walk through the specific mechanics using a hypothetical scenario. Imagine you own a rapidly growing tech startup or a successful commercial enterprise currently valued at $5 million.
Okay.
You anticipate this business is going to double or triple in value over the next decade. If you wait 10 years to give it to your children when it is worth $15 million, you will trigger catastrophic gift and estate taxes.
So you need to freeze the value today.
Exactly. You establish a GRAT with a fixed term, let's say 10 years. You transfer the $5 million business into the trust.
So the trust is now the legal owner of the business.
Yes. But here is the critical mechanism. In exchange for transferring the asset, the trust is legally obligated to pay you, the grantor, an annuity every year for the duration of the 10-year term.
How is the size of that annuity calculated?
It is calculated to return exactly 100% of your initial principal, the $5 million, back to you over the 10 years, plus a nominal, legally required interest rate set by the IRS, known as the Section 7520 rate.
Okay.
In Laird Norton's example, they use a hurdle rate of roughly 3.6%.
Wait, let me make sure I'm following the logic here.
Yeah.
You put $5 million in. Over 10 years, the trust pays you back your entire $5 million plus a tiny 3.6% interest fee.
Yeah.
From the IRS's perspective, because you were getting all your money back, you haven't actually given a gift to anyone. The net value of the transfer is legally zero.
That is precisely what it is called a zeroed-out GRAT. You owe absolutely zero gift tax upon creation. But remember, your business is inside that trust, operating and growing. If your business grows at 15% or 20% a year, it vastly outperforms that low 3.6% IRS hurdle rate.
And what happens to all that excess growth when the 10-year term expires?
The moment the term ends, you have received your initial capital back. Any residual value left in the trust, which could be $5 million, $10 million, or more in explosive upside, passes directly to your children or heirs completely, 100% free of gift or estate taxes. You have successfully transferred millions of dollars in wealth appreciation invisibly.
The only risk is if you, the creator, die before the 10-year term is up.
Correct. If you die during the term, the assets revert back into your taxable estate and you are back where you started. But if you survive the term, the wealth transfer is absolute.
It is staggering to realize that these mechanisms exist parallel to the standard tax code most people operate under. And the ebook stresses a profound urgency right now regarding these wealth transfers, specifically tied to the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We are currently living inside a historically unprecedented but temporary window of leniency.
The 2017 Act fundamentally altered the landscape by temporarily doubling the lifetime estate and gift tax exemption. Currently, an individual can pass on roughly $13.6 million, or over $27 million for a married couple, without triggering a single dollar of federal estate tax.
Right.
It is the most generous exemption in American history.
But the word temporary is the operative threat.
Yes. That specific provision of the law is scheduled to sunset or legally expire at the end of 2025, reverting back on January 1st, 2026. Unless Congress proactively passes new legislation to extend it, that $27 million exemption will be slashed roughly in half.
Which means billions of dollars of currently protected wealth will suddenly fall back into the crosshairs of a 40% federal estate tax.
Which is exactly why Laird Norton is urgently advising anyone with significant capital to aggressively execute their wealth transfers, funding these GSTs and GRATs right now, to lock in the exemption before the window slams shut.
And even if a listener doesn't have an 8-figure net worth requiring a dynasty trust, the ebook outlines immediate granular tactics that leverage the current laws. The annual gift exclusion is a prime example. You don't need a lawyer to execute this.
No, you don't.
Every single year, you can give a specific amount, currently $18,000, to as many distinct individuals as you want, completely under the IRS radar.
If you are married, you and your spouse can combine that, gifting $36,000 per recipient per year. You can give it to your children, your grandchildren, or a neighbor. It requires zero tax reporting and does not subtract from your lifetime exemption.
Furthermore, they highlight the unlimited exclusion for medical and educational expenses. If you want to help a family member, you can pay their university tuition or cover a massive medical bill without any limit, provided you write the check directly to the institution.
Right. You cannot hand the cash to your child to pay the hospital. The funds must flow directly to the provider.
If executed correctly, you are legally draining your taxable estate while radically improving your family's reality.
And for those still in the accumulation phase, particularly those executing barista fire with a small business or consultancy, the 2017 Act introduced the Qualified Business Income, or QBI, deduction.
How does that work?
If you operate as a sole proprietorship, an LLC, or an S-Corp, and your total taxable income is below a certain threshold, roughly $380,000 for a married couple, you can potentially deduct 20% of your business income straight off the top before it is ever taxed.
It is a 20% discount on the very engine generating your freedom.
It reinforces the central thesis of the ebook. Taxation is not a fixed, inevitable punishment. It is a highly malleable variable that responds directly to structural design.
This has been an immense, multidimensional journey today. We have traversed the entire spectrum of financial mechanics.
We really have covered a lot of ground.
We began in the trenches of human psychology, examining how a single mother leveraged raw discomfort and geo-arbitrage in Thailand to decouple her family from the relentless American consumer cycle, proving that extreme capability can substitute for capital.
We then subjected that psychology to the rigid mathematics of the FIRE movement, defining the 25x escape velocity and exposing the fragility of the 4% rule.
Right. We confronted Mark Schweiss's dot matrix revelation, defining lifestyle creep not as inflation, but as a silent, continuous tax levied by our own egos, a hedonic treadmill that perpetually moves the finish line of financial independence.
From there, we descended into the absolute bedrock of the Ashraf and Salisbury academic paper. We looked at the Gompertz mortality curves and Cobb-Douglas utility functions to reveal the terrifying reality of the bifurcation.
We mapped the literal mathematical boundary that dictates whether your starting capital and behavioral choices will grant you immediate freedom or permanently condemn you to the labor force.
And finally, we explored the structural defenses required once you scale that mountain. We unpacked the Laird Norton wealth management frameworks, demonstrating how asset location, strategic Roth conversions, and architectural vessels like the GRAT and Generation Skipping Trust allow you to systematically shield your capital from the compounding friction of the tax code.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. You are currently existing somewhere within this mathematical state space. Whether you are deliberately engineering a barista fire exit, desperately trying to rein in a bloated fat fire lifestyle, or simply wondering why a 6-figure salary feels like it's barely covering the bills, your daily micro-decisions are plotting a permanent trajectory.
Are you critically evaluating your baseline desires, or are you lazily attributing the evaporation of your wealth to inflation?
Are you treating the tax code as an insurmountable fixed penalty? Or are you consciously architecting your accounts to capture the millions of dollars of compounding potential hidden within tax efficiency?
These are the structural variables that define the physics of your financial life.
But as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you contemplating the most haunting element of the academic model we explored today. We spend our entire lives consumed by the terror of falling below that magenta curve, the fear of absolute poverty, of being forced to grind until our bodies fail at 88 years old. We believe the bottom is the ultimate danger.
It's what everyone focuses on.
But look closely at the math of the uncommitted curve, that razor-thin ridge in the middle of the bifurcation model. Consider this. What if the most catastrophic financial trap isn't going completely broke?
What if the true danger is surviving perfectly, comfortably in the middle?
Exactly. Hovering endlessly on that uncommitted ridge, adapting your lifestyle creep just enough to maintain the illusion of success, but never committing to the bold, deeply uncomfortable behavioral shift required to actually step off the ridge and claim your freedom.